So I'm joined here today with Snow Himbo. He is the host of his show. He's also part of the Indie News Network. And the reason why we are right now speaking and talking is because you did a breakdown analysis about Joe Biden and really how he's perceived, or at least how right now his perception is and his actions are being perceived by the American people. And let's face it, that debate that he did with Donald Trump, his interview with George Stephanopoulos, and his big boy press event showed the American people in the world that something is wrong with Joe Biden. And I think we can all agree that we all knew something wrong with Joe. Something is wrong with him. He's been on the decline for quite some time. But before these three events, tic-tac-toe, 3 in a row, the corporate media, the Democratic establishment, the vote blue, no matter who industrial complex had a strong phalanx, a Greek wall, if you would, that would say, no, nothing's wrong with Joe Biden. The phalanx kept on pushing forward, but now there's a huge break in the wall. The phalanx has crushed under the Legion of Truth. And unfortunately, we are stuck with somebody who has access to the nuclear codes, and this isn't good for a lot of us. But the thing is, your breakdown of Joe Biden and also how the press and the people have been reacting to this whole situation has been very interesting. And I would like for you to at least give us a breakdown in your thoughts overall about Joe Biden and really what this means going forward, because for a long time, I think people have been living in denial, or is that purposely lying to make sure that people would be accepting this lie. So where do we begin? Take it away.
So this was kind of a last minute thing. I host Snow Himbo streams on INN on Saturdays, and usually it's just gaming. You know, it's I provide it like I know we're all kind of doom scrolling and we're seeing horrible story after horrible story in this late stage decline of empire that we're in. So I'm like, hey, come hang out with me for a couple hours, take load off, do a hard reset. But when I saw that interview with George Snuffleupagus, that's his last name. I'm never not going to make it his last name. I just kind of thought I have to cover this because I saw so many people who were unbelievably confused, not by the dementia, the cognitive decline, but his actual behavior and his position and how he's framing everything. Right. And upon watching that interview, it became painfully apparent to me that this was pathologically disordered behavior. So in my psychological assessment, I do study psychology. I do have a degree in it. There's two things going on with Joe Biden right now. The first thing is that he most likely has dementia. We obviously don't know. None of us have examined him. But I would hedge my bet on he has Parkinson's dementia. The reason I say that is because he exhibits a lot of physical Parkinson's symptoms, and up to 80% of adults with Parkinson's will experience Parkinson's dementia, which firmly explains the cognitive issues present. But the other factor to all this is that Joe Biden is a narcissist, and as someone who studied cluster B dark triad symptoms quite a bit and studied narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder a lot, I felt like I had to provide a breakdown because when you look at this under the lens of narcissism, a lot of his behavior makes a lot more sense. A lot of his answers during that interview make a lot more sense insofar as, there was one thing he did during the interview, which is classic. And I gave a breakdown of this in my video, which you can find on my channel or INN. But
and by the way, I don't mean to cut you off. I will be posting that video in the comment section when I clip this, as well as a link in the description box as well, so that way people can find it and see your original source video. So if anyone wants to watch it in its full entirety, that will be available in this clip video. But continue on. I just want to make sure that people know where to find it.
Cool. Yeah, of course. So he did a classic thing in this interview,
Mhm.
which I would deem a narcpology, if you will, and that's the kind of apology where you go, "I'm sorry, but," because if you guys remember, throughout that whole video, he kept going, "Nobody's fault but mine." Again, nobody's fault but mine. But every time he did that, he provided a bunch of excuses, which essentially shifted the accountability from him to some external source, whether it's Trump shouting or lying or what have you. So I had to do a breakdown because essentially what we're seeing unfold in real time is in the psychology world, we call it a narcissistic collapse. And that's when a narcissist suffers a we call it a mortifying event. But essentially what it is they experience something so embarrassing or failure so great that their narcissistic defenses, the defenses that keep them feeling confident and in control and empowered, they fail. And as a result of that, what normally happens is getting audio interference, I'm hearing. What normally happens when someone suffers an event like that is that they start behaving extremely erratic. So after that debate, obviously, Joe Biden, who's enjoyed a position of extreme power, he's enjoyed the validation of millions of people. He's enjoyed the flying monkeys, if you will, in the form of the corporate press and his constant sycophants that he surrounds himself with. All of that failed. He didn't have that anymore. So he didn't have that ability to regulate his self-esteem any longer. So after that debate, it kind of explains in part why not the cognitive decline specifically, not the Vice President Trump or the 8 million other Biden.exe is not working moments that we're all a little bit delighting ourselves in. But it explains the behavior, the stubbornness of staying in the race and basically saying, it's the elites. Everybody's against me. I'm fighting for the little guy.
I don't.
So essentially, that's what's happening, and that's why we see him being as stubborn as he is. Because to Joe Biden, and once again, this isn't about him trying to beat Trump. This isn't about him fighting for the people. That's not what's happening. What Joe Biden is doing is Joe Biden is looking out for Joe Biden's prime aims, which is the ability to regulate his self-esteem, the ability to receive positive validation from a myriad of people. And most importantly, which is the most important thing for narcissists, it's control. If you're president of the United States, you have an inordinate amount of control. And that's really the thing he's fighting for. And that's the reason why he's behaving the way he is, because he feels like he has lost control of the situation. After that debate, the entire world saw that he is in clear cognitive decline. And he doesn't have control of that narrative any longer. The press can spin it as he had a cold or it's a stutter or whatever. But I mean, I've had really bad colds before. Mm-hmm. I most likely had COVID at the beginning.
I've had pneumonia.
None of my colds. Yeah, none of my colds caused me to say I beat Medicare. Mm-hmm. None of my colds caused me to confuse different people. None of my colds caused me to require my wife to help me off the steps of the debate stage. But the problem is he's not in control of that narrative anymore. He lost it. So that's why we're seeing the erratic behavior. I don't know if you guys caught the Morning Joe call-in, which I found ironic because they would always make fun of Trump for calling into Hannity and doing those like cope sessions where Hannity basically just makes him feel better about whatever criticism he got. Biden did the same thing. But if you notice, Biden's very heated in that in that specific call-in session with Joe Scarborough. He gets pissed. And that's something we like to call narcissistic rage. Because if you notice, Joe Scarborough, he's giving pushback. Biden isn't calling into that show for pushback. Biden's calling into that show because he wants his delusions validated. He wants Joe Scarborough to tell him everything's going to be okay and he's in the right and everybody else is being ridiculous. And Joe Scarborough, like him or not, he didn't do that. He provided, the pushback that was required of him because the narrative from the corporate donors has changed. And then he starts getting heated very quickly. And he starts getting angry and shouting like, watch, like that part.
So then I do have a question then, because when we look at Joe Biden now, you have Democrat donors and Democrat politicians now saying the quiet part loud, and that is in 2020, they say that, hey, we wanted Biden over Bernie because they didn't want Bernie, and these are the people that made him who he is, and now he's going after the very people who put him in office. And if there's one thing I've learned from the Prince and the discourses, and also from Sun Tzu and the Art of War, and that is, you got to make sure you keep your court and your alliances happy. Otherwise, the people who put you up are going to put you down. Now, again, the Prince and the Art of War, I mean, again, two fantastic reads. I encourage everyone to read it. But Biden is now lashing out at the very people who made him who he is. And if anything has been consistent through time, is when a monarch, a king, an emperor, tyrant, president, prime minister, pope, starts going after its own people because they made a mistake. I mean, usually that's the end of them. And that is something I would never really expect from Biden, because he needed all the help he could get just to secure the 2020 election. And the Democrats were rigging everything, because after that Nevada primary in 2020, I'm just going to speak for myself here. It could be argued that Bernie had it. He could have had it were not for that Super Tuesday. And I actually want to get your thoughts on this, because why would a narcissist now start lashing out at the very people who made him who he is? Because that is something that even Biden, who's been in politics for so long, should theoretically know better.
So one thing narcissists demand, and Trump does, for the record, Trump does the exact same thing. I said this on my segment, but I could give the exact same breakdown of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump and Joe Biden are very personality-wise very similar.
Of course.
They're both narcissists. The only difference is Trump is a grandiose narcissist, whereas Joe Biden has a bit more of a mask. Although it's a frozen face now. I don't think he has facial expressions anymore.
Hey, stop being mean. Stop being mean.
I can't help it. It's my job. So the reason why Joe Biden would lash out in this way is narcissists demand loyalty. They demand loyalty of, they don't have friends. They have sycophants. That's because narcissists put themselves on a level that naturally has to be higher than everybody else. So he's lashing out at these people. He's biting the hand that feeds, if you will, because these people aren't dancing to his tune anymore. For the longest little bit of time, all of these people were essentially just, feeding his ego. They were basically saying, "Oh, Joe, you're amazing. You tied your shoelaces," or they're basically fluffing him to the 10th degree. But now, because the donors, who are actually the ones in charge, because America, I'm sorry, but you don't really live in a democracy. You live under a dictatorship of capital.
The real identity is a constitutional republic that in theory practices democratic values, but in fact we're an oligarchy. And because we have a system in which legalized bribery is a thing, it's something that Joe Biden flourished under. After all, he is quoted for saying, I'd gladly prostitute myself to corporations, which he and his fantastic friends in the U.S. Senate and U.S. House have done. Again, everyone, a little bit off topic. Check out Unusual Whales on Twitter, and you will find out how much insider trading and capital and how rich your favorite congressman or woman has become while supposedly serving you. And again, that leads to more narcissism too. So again, you're kind of breaking it down. Continue on.
Well, yeah. So he's lashing out at these people because the real people in charge have made the decision. We don't have faith in this person anymore. We don't have faith. We're not riding with Biden. That one clip was funny. We're riding with Biden. That was so good. It sounded like a robot. So they're not riding with Biden anymore. And so what narcissists do is, in order to cope with someone not providing them that narcissistic supply, that validation, they have to devalue that person. That makes them feel better. So instead of it being a criticism on them, they cope with that by essentially making the people criticizing them or not validating them or just losing faith in general, they make them beneath them. They put them down and go, oh, well, these are bad people. They're awful people. I'm still perfect, but these people are the problem. And so that would explain a lot of this lashing out that we're seeing, especially that comment he made about, oh, it's the elites. It's like, Joe, you are the elite. What are you talking about? But again, devaluation. He has to devalue his targets to regulate his own self-esteem. Because if there's one thing that a lot of people need to know about narcissists, is that when you first think of a narcissist, you probably think of someone who's very, very confident, very very self-assured. And that's actually not true. The problem with narcissists, and the reason why they have narcissistic defenses and they engage in the behaviors they do, is because they have very unstable self-esteem. At the very core of a narcissist is deep feelings of shame and worthlessness. And that's why you see all this erratic behavior whenever there is like an embarrassing moment or a lot of criticism. You see it with Trump every day on his Truth Social, whatever thing. That's the reason why you see all this behavior. It's because narcissists depend on the external world for their self-esteem. Like you and I, we're kind of like, we're kind of like, okay, well, I'm a person of value at least. I might not be the best, but I'm somebody. Narcissists don't have that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because the thing is, doing the stuff on social media, a case could be made. Well, every single content creator, and that goes for every content creator of every genre, not just independent media, but all genres. There's a little bit of some narcissism there, here and there, but I think there's a difference, because what we see with the top 1% or people in power or these high-powered celebrities is that they are very insecure, and that kind of leads to something that for a show, I'm a huge fan of it. They already ended the series. I don't know if you've seen Succession, but it's about this rich family, billionaires, that control a Fox News adjacent kind of media network. And I don't want to spoil too much, but it shows really just how much influence these corporate billionaires have. But when you look into their personal lives, these are very insecure people who have everything. I mean, everything at their disposal. And there's one scene in particular where they throw out this lavish meal. I'm talking about cooked lobsters, steaks, and everything. And they just throw it away. These people have everything. But if they didn't have their billions of dollars, they'd be nothing. If they didn't have their power connections in DC, they would be nothing. If Biden and if Biden didn't have his connections, he really would be nothing, because he has no value. And so I'm just curious about these narcissists. What then keeps them afloat? I mean, do they surround themselves with insecure people or people who are just parasitic? Because I have two clips about the media, one from MSNBC and one from CNN, where they're feeding into this illusion, but everyone sees the truth. Before I play them, I would like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, the thing is, narcissists, some psychologists would call it a cadre, but they basically surround themselves with yes men. And it's a more natural process than you think, because anybody who doesn't provide them that validation, anyone who doesn't basically kiss their ass, their defense for that is to devalue them. So they naturally, by an organic process, end up surrounding themselves with essentially sycophants, and that's because naturally, and a lot of them aren't. This is an important thing to realize. A lot of these people are not aware of what they're doing. They're doing all of this just, base default programming. This is their operating system, if you will. But they naturally kind of weed out all the people who might be critical of them or might have like some pushback here and there, or they're trying to treat them in a fair way. And the only people left are sycophants. And it's a very organic process to go through for someone with at least strong narcissistic traits all the way up to full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. And just as a small side note, the reason this is important is politics in general in the West, in any capitalist country, really, you'll find these behaviors across the board. And that's because, in my opinion, just my opinion, I think this attracts a lot of narcissists and psychopathic people in general, because I think under a capitalist structure, to be a politician, you essentially have to be a good liar, because you have to go up there and lie that your job is to work for the everyman, to work for the people, to create the illusion that you are an elected representative and there's a democracy, and you're you're fighting for the people. But in reality, who you're working for is the rich and the powerful. You're working for corporations. You're working for billionaires. You're working for donors. But you can't say that. You can't say that to the average person. Like, oh, we'll try to get healthcare passed, but I got to see how the donors feel about it. Can't really just be that honest, right? So it attracts a lot of disordered people and a lot of manipulative people as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I do want to pull up this video here. It's from Case Study QB. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, I think we all remember that there wasn't a primary, or there was one, but let's face it, it was the world's most one-sided fist fight caught on film. But here it is from Case Study QB, and this is Simone Sanders. Folks, try not to rage out.
So, Simone, if you're in that meeting right now, if you're a member of the Biden campaign and you're trying to convince these skeptical senators, hold your fire, what's your best argument?
Look, I think your best argument is there was a primary process, and you can have qualms about how open you think that process was, but there was a primary process, and Democratic voters cast their ballots for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And talking and asking the senators in that room, have they heard from the delegates? Have they heard from the voters in their states? Because the senators, thanks to my former boss, former Senator Bernie Sanders, the senators and members of Congress, they no longer have a vote on the first ballot when it comes to convention. They're all super delegates. They are unpledged delegates, and unpledged delegates do not have a vote on the first ballot. And so I do think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the process here.
There was a process. And also right here, here's Chris Matthews. Now, folks, if you remember the Nevada primary in 2020, this man was bowing his head, holding out his hand to Bernie Sanders. He was so afraid. Were it not for Super Tuesday, this man would probably have a panic attack.
He's been good at it. He's been reelected every stand in Delaware with pretty healthy majorities. In life, he lost his wife and he lost his daughter, and he found Jill. Now, who's he going to listen to, Jill or George Clooney? I'm telling you, it's personal. He's had the elite, and it's so true about the elite. He is absolutely right about the elite. Look at President Obama. He served for 8 years loyally, and yet Obama backed Hillary Clinton for president and didn't back him. But I hear he never even invited him upstairs. He had a good reason to be resentful. He isn't. He puts up with it with the elite. But right now, he's got the poor people. He's got minorities. He's got Hispanics. He's going to put out the labor. He's going to hold that base of the Democratic Party, which he will need in November. And I'm telling you, people are going to end up rooting for him in October because he will have a comeback. And in this elite fashioned attack on him, they're going to pay for it. But in the end, they're going to end up voting for him. So I think Biden will be the little guy. He'll be the Democrat in this race, the true Democrat. and he's going to get people to turn for him in October. It's going to be stunning. He is not quitting. He is not built to quit. That's what I think, and I think it's the most important thing we're going to resolve here.
I just want to just bring this up here because, throughout this whole time, Snow, you were bringing up the fact of how narcissists surround themselves with yes men. And on yesterday's show, I talked about how a radio station in Milwaukee purposely edited and took out 2 statements that Joe Biden said during that interview because the campaign told them to do that. And that's something you're not supposed to do as a journalist. Hell, campaigns are not supposed to do that. And those 2 interviews that I just played, one from MSNBC and one from CNN, that wasn't from 2023 or 2022. That was this month in 2024, in July. That's all recent. That's after the debate. That's after the George Snuffleupagus interview. That is after Biden's big boy press event. Tic-tac-toe, 3 in a row, and yet everybody's not consuming that same lie. Will there be a further breakdown? Will there be a crack with Biden mentally? And also, will there be a breakdown in media? Because these people have been lying to the American people for like 4 years now. These yes men can only put on this facade for so long. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, there's a couple things in play here. First and foremost, we don't know how, I hate to say this, we don't know how much longer Biden has. The reality is this guy could keel over tomorrow. He's not in good shape.
No.
Just based on his gait, like his movements in general, his speech patterns. This is a man who is suffering like extreme pathologies when it comes to physical and mental symptoms. So we really don't know when the wheels on the broken down golf cart are going to fall off. He might do a statement and just kind of keel over like a domino, and that's that. That's all, folks. So there's that factor, but also this really depends. And speaking to these clips that you're kind enough to show, this really speaks to the narrative management that the Biden administration is trying to do. And I feel like what's truly behind this is Joe Biden's trying to get back to a place where he's receiving the positive affirmation that regulates his self-esteem, because he's still not. He's aware enough, I think, well, somewhat aware, maybe, I don't know. It's so hard to tell now. It's like, is he there? Is he not?
For me, I've watching this on the one hand, this has been very therapeutic for me because for 4 years, myself and my colleague Daniel, who's also the co-founder for Hard Lens Media, we got a lot of pushback. We've been censored, demonetized, shadow banned, channel at risk of being terminated because, we talked about, the Democrats and other social issues. But, when we talked about Joe Biden, what we got back from a lot of liberals and even progressives was, hey, guys, don't you see how much of a danger Trump is? And I get it. I understand what Trump represents to people. But what disappointed me and Daniel was the kind of reality people were putting out there for Joe Biden and trying to believe this lie that, oh, he's just fine. He's just fine when he's not. I had 4 relatives go through decline. And my grandpa, he didn't suffer too much from dementia and Alzheimer's. I mean, he obviously at 95 going to 96, everybody starts falling apart. I don't care who you are. I mean, it's a rarity for a person to be 100%. And yes, are there senior citizens like that? Absolutely. They're the exception. The general rule is downhill. And for me, watching this, on the one hand, I'm eating it up because I've been proven correct. And in many ways, I'm kind of being an egomaniac here. But on the other hand, too, doesn't his family love him? Because we talked about this before we went live, and you made this great point. It's one thing to tell grandpa or grandma, hey, you can't drive the car or the family van. I mean, and they get it. I mean, we've all been through that, or we've seen friends talk to us about what they had to deal with their loved ones when they reach that age. And it's not an easy thing to talk about. And it's another thing altogether to have a person in that kind of same mental, physical fitness, we're down in decline, and they're in charge of the nuclear codes. and it's a nightmare. And I've brought this up here because maybe we could talk about a little bit about the family dynamic just for a little bit, because if Joe Biden's family truly loved him, they wouldn't do that. And it says a lot to maybe how Biden raised his family, his relationship with Jill. Is it all about power? Is it all about narcissism? I mean, I am confused by this, and it makes me wonder: are these politicians, are they even people at this point? Because a normal person, anyone in my audience, I don't care where they align politically, would not do this to their loved one. I'd have to assume that. I have to assume that, unless there's something I'm missing here. Could you? I want to get your thoughts on this.
Okay, so speaking to the family dynamic, there's a couple things here. First and foremost, who narcissistic people select as their partner can vary quite a bit. But for the most part, what they usually end up with are, and I don't know Jill Stein's personality.
Right.
She could be putting on a big front. All we see from her is performance. So it could be a union of two narcissists where they kind of instinctively understand like when to validate one another, when to like relinquish control, when to take control. That could be. But who they normally end up with are empaths, empathic people. People who are, I don't know if you're aware of Narcissus and Echo, that time-honored tale of the man who fell in love with his reflection.
Narcissus. That's I think.
Yeah, Narcissus. Sorry, I bind it. But
you got secondhand Joe Mencia.
Yeah, secondhand Joe Mencia. I finally beat Medicare though, so that's what's important.
As you should.
But no, Joe Putin. So what usually happens is they end up with very empathetic people, echoes, if you will. And what happens is they have people who essentially feed their delusions. That's usually the people they marry or end up long-term with. So Jill essentially could be feeding Joe's delusions. She could be the one, where he's trying to cope with all of the criticism and he's desperate for any kind of validation, and she's just there feeding him. So she could be just doing her role as an empathetic person, going, "No, Joe, you're great. You got this. You're doing great." That could be the case. It also could be the case that Jill Biden is also narcissistic and she's enjoying the spotlight. She's enjoying the validation, and she's enjoying the privilege of being the first lady. As for Hunter, I do need to make a slight note. There's a dynamic with how narcissists raise their children. Mm-hmm. If you're a narcissist and you have kids, there's almost a 100% chance that you're going to grow up in an emotionally invalidating environment. Mm-hmm. Because narcissists do not have effective empathy. They can pretend, they can use cognitive empathy, so they can act in a way that they understand is the way to act in a situation where you have to be empathetic. But that doesn't translate over to organic empathy. So children usually grow up in a very emotionally invalidating environment because they experience strong feelings, and they don't have a parent who can validate those emotions. And what usually happens as a case of that is the child grows up with an inability to regulate their emotions. And one of the biggest problems someone with emotional dysregulation has is substance abuse.
Very true. Now, you bring up Hunter, and there's something else that we have to look at, because Hunter always seemed to be playing catch up to his brother Beau. And I gotta find that video, and that there's a video and article both relating to Beau Biden before he passed away. His one thing that Joe Biden said, and we have to maybe, I don't know, take it as truth or not. I don't know, give or take, maybe a grain of salt. But Beau's words to Biden were, to his father, "Are you going to be okay? Are you going to be okay?" And the reason why I'm starting that off first is because back when Beau was still in his prime, and I think there was a situation, I think either in Ukraine or they were doing some kind of deal. Hunter and Biden's brother were involved in it, and Beau really seemed to get angry because they were taking advantage that Joe Biden, being VP at the time, under the Obama administration, was kind of like being used under them. And to me, it kind of looks like, at least how it's been perceived, or how was presented, was that Beau was sort of like Biden's unofficial guardian. I don't know what that dynamic was, it looked like that Bo was kind of keeping that ship together. It wasn't Biden that was doing it. It looked like Bo that was doing it until when Bo left or passed away. It looked like, again, there was this trajectory then of a spiral that not only did Hunter have to live up under the shadow of Bo, but then you have Joe, who's just out there now on his own, a narcissist. What are your thoughts on that family dynamic there? Because Bo does play a factor in it.
So another thing about narcissistic parenting, and I'm not just aware of that because the stuff I nerd out on, I have personal experience with this. Mm-hmm. So in narcissistic families, there's an interesting dynamic. You have what's called a golden child and a scapegoat. These can vacillate, but the golden child is essentially the child that the narcissist they get their self-esteem from, because the golden child is essentially an avatar for the narcissist. This is the one that they're saying, he gets that from his dad, or, oh, he's just like me. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the dynamic you have with a golden child. And then there's a scapegoat, which is essentially the child that is being devalued because they are not living up to the expectations set by the narcissist. So when Bo exited the picture, and I've lost track of how many different situations Bo died in, according to Joe Biden at this point.
He died of cancer, folks. Miss Richie Perfect. Everyone else is saying in the chat, yes, he died of cancer. That's what happened to Bo Biden. He died of cancer, not in Iraq, not on a battlefield.
Not in World War II or whatever.
Oh, God. Let's not talk about his uncle who was eaten by cannibals.
That's my favorite. It's like, that's... Where did you even access that part of your brain, sir?
I don't know.
Yeah. So there is this dynamic. And when Bo exited the picture, the family dynamic had to change. And so from Joe Biden, he didn't really have a golden child anymore. All he had left was what we can assume is probably the scapegoat. I don't know Hunter personally, but it doesn't look like he's been having a relatively enjoyable life. He seems like a very tortured person. He seems like a person who is desperately trying to reach a level of homeostasis through various, very self-injuring behaviors. But essentially what happened was Joe was kind of stuck with Hunter. And he was stuck with essentially a scapegoat that he had to kind of make a golden child. And with Hunter, he's probably, I don't know when the all the drug craziness started, but going from a scapegoat to a golden child essentially means that you go from essentially being shunned. Sorry, just looking at the chat. Pincus, I love Sam Vaknin. If you want to study narcissism, go look up Sam Vaknin. I love that book.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead. We got that. Yes. Shout out to the chat. Hey, audience, love your feedback. Continue.
But yeah. So Hunter all of a sudden had all these expectations thrust upon him, possibly by Joe Biden. So that dynamic can be incredibly stressful, because essentially all the spotlights are now on you. You have to live up to all of these expectations. And the problem with having a narcissist as a parent is that, their expectations are never realistic, because they're grandiose people. They don't want you to do good in school. They want you to be better than everybody else at school. And even if you are better than everybody else at school, they want you even better than how much you are better than them, because they're now depending on you as a kid to regulate their self-esteem.
My goodness. So then it does explain a lot. It's all about power. So I think breaking this all down, looking, because we could be here for hours upon hours on end talking about the Biden administration and his decline. And let's be clear, this is his downfall. And when you did bring up hey, Biden could keel over tomorrow. The thing is, yes, folks, when you exhibit the physical and mental decline that you see in somebody's at Biden's age, yes, this does take a toll. And I don't think we barely even talked about what kind of cocktail or concoction formula, powder, sugar, if you want to call it, they're giving Biden so he looks coherent. But every time they seem to give him a boost, it's taking a toll on him. It's putting him down further and further till one day we'll probably wake up in the morning and hear, oh, Joe Biden has passed away, which is not happening. Biden is still around. But, besides that, too, his other physical issues that when he sleeps, he has a CPAP machine attached to his face, which helps him breathe. And so that means his brain isn't getting enough oxygen. So if he doesn't have that on there, there's going to be moments where Biden isn't taking any air at all and he's suffocating. And, having sleep apnea or anything of that nature is also detrimental to a person's body because it takes a toll on their heart, it takes a toll on their brain, takes a toll on everything there. And this is, I want to make an argument saying that this is kind of maybe how the ancient Romans felt when they had like a Caligula or a Nero or a Commodus or something. And again, if we go back to antiquity, we have seen times when empires, city-states, nations, kingdoms have had their mad king or a senile king or or a complete narcissist or somebody that's completely off the edge. And it is something that every nation goes through, but this is out there. And what surprises me still is that there are people collectively still going in for Biden because of their fear for Trump. And I want to be clear on this. I don't want to see Trump get reelected. Hell, I don't want to see him get elected at all. But at the same time, too, I am expecting some kind of accountability and maybe, dare I say, it's work ethic from the other side, but I don't see it. And this problem, if it's not addressed, is going to give us another Biden somewhere down the road. I mean, the only way out of this is by dismantling the political system that we have, getting money out of politics, abolishing political parties. But the thing is, and maybe I'll give you the final word on this for your thought, and maybe it's a little more complicated, but the people have to start stepping up. And since the people have been trained for a very long time, decades, to trust the media, to trust the political system, to trust our institutions, that's a tall order to ask average Americans to break away from when they've been so used to everything as just trust it. It's just fine. Leave it alone. People know what they're doing. And now it's being revealed. No, they don't. And you're probably more competent than all of Washington, D.C. put together. I don't know. I want to give you the final word on that.
So the real here's my take on electoralism, at least in the West. So we've all seen and enjoyed and laughed at quite a bit. I was in tears during the debate. I was making dolphin noises. I was laughing so hard. But we've all seen that Biden's brain is not working. So you have to ask yourself, if this person who is so incapable of running anything is the president, what does it matter who's in charge? That's why I kind of roll my eyes at the whole ooh, we got to stop Trump or whatever.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. I love that. You do that.
No problem.
So whenever people are like, oh, we got to stop Trump or we got to stop this boogeyman, I'm like, what does it matter? If someone whose brain is clearly not working is president, they're not running the country. That's just a fact. Joe Biden is not running the country. He can't be. And if he is in some capacity, then he's obviously getting a lot of help from people that Americans didn't elect. So right. Trump, Biden, Megatron, the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, whoever you elect there, it doesn't really matter. Right. Nothing's fundamentally going to change. The rich are going to get richer, the poor are going to get poorer, and the bombs are never going to stop falling.
Right. I think that's a good note to end it on here, folks. And you know what? There was an opportunity, a very good question that Georgie Snuffleupagus could have asked, and that was, hey, Biden, who's run the country when you're asleep at 4 p.m.? 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Even Big Red's schedule is more productive. 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Bother him afterwards, you're getting thrown out the window. Folks, it's a clown show, and it's a sad fact.
If you fool me once, it's because I didn't think a guard was needed. If you fool me twice, it's because I didn't learn the lesson, so it bears repeating. If you try the same play 3 times running, it's because you know what's coming, and you didn't come to lead, you came to purposefully be misleading. Democracy is dry. It's been a century bleeding. The husk is gaping open to the sky, out in the field where all the sheep just keep on circling and worrying and bleeding. They're waiting for the shepherd that they've tried to hide their faith in, but he's so appealing. They'd gladly give their fleece. It's such a freeing feeling that even when he leads them to the ledge and starts to urge them on, they're positively beaming. They were told that they were on their way to save democracy, so even as they plummet, they just gloat. They don't consider screaming. And halfway up the cliff, the shepherd's cozy little mittens wrap around the staff of shattered human hopes on which he's leaning. He shows the gentle grin that used to stir your inner spark, and he says, "Not me, us," as he gestures to the oligarchs. He knows that if he runs, they're going to stop him like a stolen car. And he'll easily surrender because it bought a lot of time for laying mines in all the grassroots. Suddenly, the tiniest of movements gets you blown apart. Suddenly, you're in a play that's set on an election day, and voting for the fire, unaware you're playing Joan of Arc. Suddenly, the shepherd pulls the rug and slips a hood across your clueless mug, and everything goes zero dark. I'm gonna warn you once more before it's 2024 and you fuck around and find out who your heroes are. To take a step back from the herd, and you'll learn that you can spot who all the shearers are. If you really want to know the product that they're selling, I can take you where the mirrors are. If you think your voice is finally ready, I can tell you where the lyrics are. I hid them in a box I had to bury neath the cobble when they carpet bombed the promenade and raided all the street bazaars. Now all we've got's the marketplace, and you're too broke to even bother asking what the options for your treatment are. Suddenly, the raw debris of homeless human dignity will find it has 100 teeth for every badge and sweeper's arm. Suddenly, they speak in solidarity and each is armed. Suddenly, the sheep can see the shepherd for his truest form and all pitch in at once to help him buy the farm. And now it's zero dark, and all is calm and peaceful save the distant wail of sirens that approach beside the flames of dawn. Suddenly, the carrot's just a string that's on a stick, and all your movements make you sick because the prize is gone. Now we could go and flee into the forest low and meek, or we can exercise our right to feast and go and graze on Biden's lawn. Because he's been sowing seeds that seep a toxin out to sap a bit from each of us and keep on leaching decades after Biden's gone. So regardless who they summon out of hell to come and do the job, it will not feel like Biden's gone. But in that time of hopelessness, you cannot trust the shepherd when he once again comes asking you to humor him his siren song. And it's cute that you can innocently, honestly assume that's just a symptom of a system that was wired wrong, and not the standard feature, basic function, primary objective of a mass hypnosis firebomb. You don't need to know the words to cry along. Someday it'll hit you like an officer who pistol whipped their ride along. Broke his jaw and kept his job and kept it moving right along. That voting isn't red or blue or black or white or right or wrong. Voting's like a firing squad where you can choose the firearm. It's slow extinction by and large. It's Super Tuesday supercharged. It's all your futures, roots and all, just tossed out on a garbage barge. It's everybody dropping out to push the biggest oligarch. It's everybody voting fire, registered as Joan of Arc.